artists, how you doing today? It is week 3 of the 30 days 30 faces challenge on the Sketchy app, which I've been doing for the last couple of weeks. And so if you want to know about those 2 weeks, I'll go ahead and link them in the description box below. Right now we're going to focus on week 3, and let me tell you, there's hits and misses. But that's what this class is all about, really. And if you're interested in joining the Sketchy app community, it is completely free. They have free classes there, and you can just click the little link in the description box below. That being said, let's just go ahead and get right into it because there's a lot that has happened in this past week. Okay, so let's discuss day 15. I almost forgot there. Okay, day 15 was this wonderful, colorful sketch, and basically the idea from the reference photo was to create that same kind of multicolored filter that it had over it, but use colored pencils in the process. Not everyone used the colored pencils in the community, but you know me, I love my colored pencils, and this was a really cool project. I went in, I wasn't feeling it for some reason, and once I actually kind of got into it about 2/3 of the way, just even half of the way, it really did actually kind of start to come together. I'm really just now kind of into this idea of not finishing everything. So keeping the focus on, the details in the eyes and the facial features very sharp, but maybe like, as you can see, I've done some scribbling towards the bottom, just as a nice little stylized touch. And I really feel like that kind of lends itself to a little bit of creative license there. And I really like the end result of it. So I feel like the colors were really, really interesting and fun. And it was really nice to be able to not have to rely completely on photorealism to capture a portrait. So okay, that being said, let's move on. The lesson for day 16 was to use a medium that we don't use that often or haven't used ever before. So I decided to go ahead and dive into these new markers that I had been given to me, which I'll do a review on in another video. They're from Parku. I used that, and I used some of the Art and Fly markers for her hair with the brush tip. And then I used just a little bit of colored pencil over her cheeks and for her eyeshadow a little bit. But you know what? I was really, really super surprised at how well it turned out, because there's a certain amount of trust that goes into using markers for a portrait, I feel like, because they go on darker, then they dry lighter, of course. And so you kind of have to trust the process. Surprisingly, this was one of my favorites of the week, which I was not going into it thinking it would be anything special, but it turned out I really, really liked it. I really liked the color that I used on the background for the rest of the portrait, because I feel like it really kind of brought out the brown in her eyes and beautiful hair and everything. So, it was nice to be able to work with something for a portrait that I hadn't really used that much before for portraits. I feel like this might open a new avenue to possibly doing more portraits with markers. So let's hope. I didn't know if I was gonna do this or this, but let's hope. Talk about trusting the process. Day 17 was an ink brush portrait, okay? Starting with something unfamiliar other than the face, using the hands of all things as a starting point. So we all started with, I think the left hand it was, technically her right hand in the portrait. What a cool photo reference, And I really enjoyed this, but it was so scary because you're going in, you don't really know how it's going to turn out, and ink is a commitment. Our instructor told us in a live drawing class that his mentor gave him the idea to use ink, said, hey, you need to start drawing in ink because it is a commitment. And I thought that's brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. I love our instructor's artwork. He's fantastic. His name is Dylan Sarah. He's brilliant. So check him out on Instagram. I also feel like I didn't trust myself enough because I did use a little bit of sketching first on like her jawline and her lips and the fingers on her left hand. I did use a little bit of preliminary kind of just sketching it out. Most of it I had to just trust my gut and just trust the process. So one day I'll actually 100% trust the process. I'm gonna need more tea. Okay, so day 19 was this fantastic portrait of this elderly gentleman with all this snow in his beard and on his jacket, on his cap, everything. Ultimately, I could have just left out the skin tones, but for some reason, I just kind of went gung-ho with this because I hadn't worked with pastel pencils in a very, very long time. So the point was to focus on the white of the portrait, like the snow in his beard and everything, which is often neglected. And, the white pencils are often neglected unless they're being layered on top to blend or to utilize a highlight. So this was really kind of a cool exercise. I really liked the idea of using the paint pen too on top, which was a Faber-Castell pen, and I believe the Chocola acrylic white paint pen at the very end and during the process. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I'm really happy with the way that the texture on the cap looks with the snow, and I enjoy it. I got a little sloppy towards the end with the jacket and just kind of left it undone, but really I've been wanting to focus on the faces instead of all the details, all the little details. So there's a time and a place for that though. This was fun too with the expression lines as well. I really enjoyed this particular exercise, plus it got me out of my comfort zone with the pastel pencils instead of just regular colored pencils. And I also used the new pastels by Prismacolor, which I really taken a liking to. So okay, day 19 was a complete black and white ink drawing and kind of utilizing just the absolutes of a portrait instead of the midtones. It was a simple approach, but also challenging, because you really have to make these executive decisions about where the black is going to go, and you still have to make it look like the portrait of the person. So there has to be somewhat of a likeness there, but also to respect the value of black itself and just use that. This was fun. I really liked it. I also like the instructor used the Andrew Loomis method for drawing the head, which I think really helps out a lot with creating the structure of the head and where the proportions go. Okay, so last week on day 14, I used an Elegant Writer, and that's a calligraphy pen, and I used that with some water and some turquoise ink. I feel like it was a very successful painting. It wasn't so much on day 20. I loved the reference photo. Let me preface it with that. It was a fantastic, nice expressive portrait. This woman has a lot of sass. I really like it. It has a lot of character to it. I don't feel like this portrait in hindsight was the best portrait to use for the Elegant Writer, and I now know that after doing it. I might tighten up some of the features, maybe with some pencil on top or something like that, but I think it's just too loose of an application to use on this particular portrait. But I am going to film a tutorial for you on that particular method of painting. It is really gorgeous as far as the colors go, but I've now learned that I think it's going to be good for certain things, and then you're going to have to either approach it, I'm going to have to either approach it a little bit differently or use a specific portrait that it'll work for with a nice loose approach. So the whole objective was to use this portrait as start with the borders of her face. It was a high contrast reference photo, as you'll see, and using the kind of the border around the face with her hair to start with, and then ink all around it. So that was pretty cool. I really liked the picture. It's really cool. I wasn't happy with my results. That being said, we're going to end this on a positive note because I really like the end result of this particular exercise. And so finally, we have come to day 21, and Marissa, our instructor, told us to work with the photo that she had given us and use it as a tool for a monochromatic painting or drawing. I decided to go ahead and go with watercolor, and I don't think I've ever done a monochromatic portrait before, oddly enough, as many years as I've been using watercolor. Several now, but what a cool way to approach a portrait. And it had such a wonderful reference photo. This woman's gorgeous. She's got these, beautiful highlights and, and wonderful shadows. And so I used that to make absolutes, but also make shadows within shadows. I feel like even whenever something is really high contrast, that you can still use your watercolor to create layers and create value. And I think that is what creates such a rich, dramatic, in-depth portrait. And so I used White Nights watercolor. There are two colors in there that I'm really in love with, and one of them is the indigo color, and the other one is, I believe it's called turquoise. If it's not, I'll correct myself. But those two were the main colors that I used for this portrait. And I also used what's called Lunar Black by Daniel Smith, and this is a highly granulating color. It's absolutely gorgeous, but I used it a little bit sparingly. I used it in the first layer a lot, and then I used more of the turquoise and the indigo on top of that. But I mean, the thing about monochromatic portraits is, depending on the medium that you use, you really have to be careful about where you place your values, because you want to make sure that you save your darkest value for things like the pupils and the absolute darkest shadows. So this was fun though, and it took longer than I expected. I got more involved with it than I expected, and that's okay because I really, really like the end result. I really liked this week because it was a mixture of different things and challenges, and just the whole thing's been kind of a mixed bag of different approaches, different challenges, different exercises. And join me next week because I'll be on week 4. And then I probably will do like an overview of everything, all the things I learned, how I grew as an artist. But definitely check out Sketchy if you can. I'm not sponsored by them. I really have had such a positive experience that I really want to share this experience with you and share that, you know, you can obviously have a positive experience too. I think we need more of these types of apps and communities that are very, very nicely structured, and we have artists teaching other artists. And what I like about it is that there is no competition. Everyone's just posting their results and cheering each other on, saying, you know, hey, I like this. This is great, you know, and seeing all the different styles. Anyways, I have seen so many wonderful channels with so many ideas on what we could do during this time as well, and I'll put some links in the description box below for some of those videos as well. I really feel like it's really crucial to lean on each other for advice and for inspiration right now. So I hope that I can be a part of that for you, and I certainly look for it in other artists too. So thank you for joining me today. Hit that subscribe button if you will, and you will see all things art. All right, well, I will see you next week, folks. Take care, follow me on social media, have a good day, and I will see you next week. Keep creating and stay inspired. Our instructor's mentor, he told us that all right, if I could ever find it, let's see. God, you're so prepared, Jane. And create that sort of can't even talk. Doing Virgo a service. I'm a Virgo. Like on the fingers on the left hand. Her right. No. And the fingers on to not make it look, you still have to make it look like of the whole lesson. Oh, I got a Reddit notification. So I forget to turn off my notifications. My body and my brain act almost like independently sometimes, and sometimes my brain is faster than my mouth, so then I stumble over my words, and then sometimes my body doesn't want to catch up with my brain, and then sometimes my brain isn't catching up with my body. So there are things to keep that in sync. One of them is caffeine. Hello, tea.